All right, there we are live on YouTube. And so, good morning, everybody. So grateful that we're all here together, sharing this beautiful book, A Symphony of Love, the story of Ken Wapnick, his basically his life story, and it was compiled, I believe, by his wife Gloria. um, and so we've really been going through the the life of Ken. And we've been learning a lot about music that I didn't know either. So, and Bruce, I marked the place, but I think I might have marked it in the wrong place. But anyway, I'm going to put it up on the board. And how are you doing this morning, Bruce?
I'm well, thanks. Yeah, I have us at the paragraph that begins with "at the end of July 1969."
Oh, I guess I'm okay then.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
I think
done the
that's where we
right
left off.
thing. Yeah, that's it. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I'm on a digital version too, so
Oh yeah. So yeah, it's hard to say what pages because
right.
depending on the size of the font, you're
And how
gonna have
wide you
different
have the
pages.
screen and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I have to remember all the time. So, how about I let you read
Okay.
and I'll take my medicine.
Sounds sounds good. Well, you'll get double medicine then, because this is medicine for the mind here.
That's right, mind and soul.
Okay, not Ken, but the ideas that can held dear. And I did actually, since you mentioned, um, usually it was when I had the book in front of me, the physical book, it was easy to just flip to the front cover and read the front cover details. But what I did is I put what was in the title page of this digital edition in my calendar. So every week I can just read it. It's A Symphony of Love, selections of Dr. Kenneth Wapnick's writings, autobiographies, poetry, short stories, and articles edited by Gloria Wapnick. So that's the what's on the front cover on the as well as the probably the title page inside. So I will pick up where we left off last week. And oh, just a quick administrative note. I will need to leave a few minutes early since I'm hosting a meeting right after this one. Um, okay, so at the end of July 1969, this is Ken's biography here. I moved up to my new apartment in Poughkeepsie. It marked the first time in my life I had ever truly lived physically alone, and it represented the beginning of the next important period in my life. It lasted a little over 2 years and fell roughly into two distinct stages, the first lasting for about a year and a half. As Christ began to assume a more dominant role in my life, though still surprisingly unknown to me, it would perhaps be best to digress once more to review my involvement and contact with Christianity until this time. Um, I guess my first contact with Christianity of sorts occurred when I was very young, not more than 8 years old. A non Jewish sleep in maid we had at that time had taught me to say a good night prayer by kneeling beside my bed. I have no other recollection of it, nor its content, though I strongly doubt if it contained any reference to Jesus, except that I know I found it pleasant, and comforting. It did not last very long, however, for as soon as my mother noticed what I was doing, she put an abrupt stop to it. My next contacts also carried a strong, in quote, verboten, unquote, quality. It's almost a tongue twister. As in the yeshiva, Jesus was distinctly a very dirty word. We were told never to cross our legs when we sat, and I recall one teacher tracing for us the derivations of such expressions as gee and zounds and telling us never to use them. Gosh, another little etymological side trip, I suppose. But I also remember being interested and even attracted to the gospel stories and occasionally reading the New Testament before I went to sleep. So I must have snuck in a Bible, huh? In high school, of course, my circle of friends grew to include non-Jews, which in Brooklyn almost invariably meant Catholics. It was there I first became aware of the strong repressive tendencies of the church, since, for example, my Catholic friends were not allowed to go to all the movies I could attend. In college, I studied Christianity, and though interested in religion in general, I wrote one paper comparing the psychologist Erich Fromm to St. Augustine. I did not feel the church had anything to offer. It'd be interesting to read some of his early papers, wouldn't it? I did not feel the church had anything to offer, but I attended a Protestant service once in one of the beautiful New York churches, though have little memory of it now, except I remember noting how much better, quote, behaved, unquote, the people seemed to be than in the synagogues I knew. As my interest in music developed, I, of course, became interested in the great choral writings, particularly Bach and Handel, and occasionally went to churches on Sunday afternoons to hear performances of these works. My interest in Jesus grew too as both a historical and mythological symbolic figure, and I was able to identify with his life and the symbolic function I felt he had for all of us. Nikos Kazantzakis' novel, I spelled pronounce that right, The Last Temptation of Christ, portraying Jesus as a kind of existential hero, also made a strong impression on me. While in graduate school, my interest continued and I read some books dealing with the symbolic Christ as opposed to the historical one, and with the origins of Christianity. He's already kind of doing the course correction before the course. So, you know, getting to the symbol, getting to the raw root and the cause and the source rather than the historic history of bodies. And even music became a part of that interest. I saw my three favorite composers as a form of the Trinity: Beethoven as God, the awesome, unreachable Father; Mozart as the comforting, loving Son, while Wagner represented for me the Apostle Paul, the carrier of the Holy Spirit into the world. As a substitute for the Jewish, quote, mezuzah, with three Z's, unquote, I placed silver coins of the three composers on my doorpost. Okay. It was while in graduate school, but before I even began work on St. Teresa, that I bought the painting of Jesus that came to mean so much to me. While at an art exhibit in Greenwich Village, I had visited an artist whose paintings, particularly those with Christian themes, had made a strong impression on me the year before. He painted directly on wood, and his paintings had a power, intensity, and authenticity that was usually not present in art of this kind. I had been particularly struck by one of the weeping women at the foot of the cross. This year, we had enough money and I planned to buy a painting, but all he had on exhibit were commercial works, and when I complained to him, he pleaded the artist's perennial case of money. But he apologized and said I was welcome to come to his home studio where he had many of the, quote, other kind, unquote, of paintings. I did not have to be invited twice. When I got there, I no more than took one step through the doorway when I was confronted by him, or perhaps it was more like it. Interesting, because that's what Helen called Jesus. It, in quotes, was a huge 4 foot by 6 foot head of Jesus, but certainly unlike one I had ever seen. More animal than human, the painting consisted of a horrible, terrifying, and most ghastly face, filled with the anguish and pain I immediately associated with his struggle in the desert with the devil. A struggle I always felt I had to be more than the intellectual discussion that is depicted in the Gospels. And now here he was, looking me right in the eye, but I could not bear it and walked quickly away. I searched all 3 floors, examined and re-examined every painting and work of art there was, but ultimately knew that I had no real choice. He had claimed me, and try though I might, I could not resist what I already knew in my soul. The painting was mine, and I was its. And so home it came. It,
I think this is just so amazing
yeah, pretty interesting,
because
huh?
he was
Yeah.
called. It was like, you know, I was talking, we had a lady in a group the other day and she was Jewish, and she had, when she was a kid, her friend had talked her into coming into church with her. And they were pretty much told, hey, you don't go in a Christian church, you don't mess around with you. These people are evil, they're going to try to hurt you. Because there's been a real, I mean, look at Mel Gibson and the Passion of the Christ, how it just made it look like the Jewish people were just like the worst and that they killed Jesus. And so, she went with that being a Jewish girl, having this thing being thrown up in her face all the time that, you guys killed Jesus. And so,
I never
uh,
saw that movie, but
yeah, well, me neither, and I'm glad I didn't because I had no desire, to see any of that crap, but, because I didn't believe it, but, she said that when she went into this Christian church, probably a Catholic church, I'm sure, and the first thing she saw was, a half-naked guy hanging up, in front with, blood and injuries all over him, and she was just horrified that, this character was so, uh, just so pathetic. And I can just imagine Ken walking in and seeing this picture of Jesus looking all, verklempt, I guess.
yeah. And not even any of that yellow tape that says police line, do not cross,
Yeah, exactly.
hanging
So
from
it's
the
a crime
crucifix.
scene. Anyway, continue reading.
Okay. So Ken continues. Um, it was certainly not the kind of thing one could easily live with on a daily basis. So though it was hung prominently, I would not always look at him. But when I did, or felt his call to me, which occurred if I seemed to be wandering too far from his path, I felt him like an older brother urging me along, if not demanding my more active participation. He was not a figure easily to be argued with, so I either complied. I was gonna say, what was he complying? Okay, a little dyslexia there. So I either complied or else did my best to avoid him. Clearly, the painting was extremely important to me, though certainly not as a figure of Jesus himself, but what or who it was that had such an effect on me, I did not think about. In the final year of the marriage, when my soul did not live in the house, the painting stayed in the closet. The ostensible reason having been that there was no wall space to hang him. It was only near the end that I would occasionally take him out and look rather guiltily at him. Shall I continue? Do you want to read?
Sure, I'll read, yeah.
Okay.
So he put Jesus in the closet.
Yeah, it's got to you got to take that out of into the light. How symbolic, huh?
It is really funny, it's really symbolic.
Mhm.
And I
Well,
like the way that he talked just briefly about when my soul did not live in the house.
mhm.
In the final year of the marriage, when my soul did not live in the house, the painting stayed in the closet. That is wow, very telling of the whole situation there. And it's hard for me to imagine Ken in that situation, but of course, that's what we all have to go through. I know you've been married more than once, so have I. And
Mhm.
where I thought it was, the forever thing the first time, and it lasted 3 years, which was basically 2.5 years too long. Because we didn't live together. It was, yeah. So, how interesting. I just, hearing about Ken in this earlier life just seems like, finding out that Jesus was married, which was not such a big shock to me, but certainly made more sense than what I'd been told my whole life. Uh, but okay, so Ken
Well,
continues.
apparently that it would have been very unusual in that time and place for a Jewish person to not be married.
Yes,
So
a Jewish
so
man
that
of
was
that
that was
age.
that was why you know it
Yeah.
it didn't seem like, I mean, given that historical precedent, it didn't seem like from that historical story unusual. But of course, the course, as Ken points out in so much of his work, is that the historical Jesus and the 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 fundamentalist religious Christian Jesus has nothing to do with the Jesus in A Course in Miracles. And if they're are overlaps, it almost is more coincidental than uh, helpful.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Just because, I mean, if you think about what's portrayed in the Christian Bible, Jesus basically carries the same schizophrenic and dualistic uh, philosophy and thinking as the biblical God, which is, one day waxing kind and benevolent, and the next day going around smiting and destroying, and so it's just obviously the religious, not just Christianity, but the religious um, deities that we have in our culture are intrinsically dualistic, and that's why there's such a radical at the root departure of the course's metaphysics from just about any formal religion out there, anyway, with pretty few exceptions, none that I know of, anyway. And
yeah.
yeah, and to try
Yeah,
to mix the two is as both Ken and Gloria say in their both the early work and the Ken's later work, is counterproductive, and won't help you, won't help anyone if they're trying to mix a dualistic philosophy with, and thinking with a non-dualistic one.
yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. So, and I
Mm-mm.
see that Robert has his hand up. Please,
Oh, yeah,
Robert.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, that kind of dualism around God Himself would be enough to drive you crazy. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm getting up this morning. What am I going to get? Wrath or love? That doesn't work for me. It never did.
Yes, yes, exactly. I had the same revelation when I was an adolescent, and probably before, and it's like, something's wrong with this story. And about the time that I was wondering, what's this whole church thing? And my mom was having, uh, when I was a teenager, having this similar kind of questioning about the inconsistencies, and was dragging us around to every church she could find in the Livermore Amador Valley, pretty much, and we tried a few for a while, and then it was like, no, this isn't working. And finally, she got into metaphysics, and among the many books in her library that ultimately filled 3 bedrooms and part of the living room, um, there was 3 blue books that appeared. I'm not sure if it was late 70s or early 80s, but I remember asking to borrow them when I moved up to the Northern California foothills, when I discovered there were people studying this thing called A Course in Miracles. I said, hey, I know those. I've seen those three books, but I thought they were religious. And then I started reading. So no, it's not, it's much more than that. In fact, it's in many ways antithetical to so many of the precepts that dualistic upbringing. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, it's just the opposite, really, of what you've
Yeah.
been told your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, which, you didn't come up with a kind of ritualized, formalized religion. And
Well,
so,
we did attend a church, a Presbyterian church, until my early teens, I think it was. But
was
anyway,
that, I think, is that pretty much same as Catholic? I think it may be very close to being the same.
well, it's one of the more formal. I mean, I think Lutheran's probably the closest to Catholicism, from what I understand. But I mean, I don't. I'm not a religious scholar by any sense of the imagination, so I'd have to defer to other people who have studied those more carefully than I. But
Yeah,
we got something really useful in the form of Course in Miracles. But it's really and it's not even the form, it's really the content of the Course in Miracles. It's the idea is that we are extending, if you will, into what we think of as the blue book, and now we've got this digital version, and now we're reading about the guy who made it all so vivid and alive and meaningful for us, and his alleged life story.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is, I mean, what an alleged life,
yeah.
how
And
grateful
and
am
we're
I?
alleging that we still exist in form. So what better thing for alleged humans to do than read about another inspiring alleged human who was prodigious, prolific, and profound in his writing and teachings, and so much of his audiovisual work as well, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
He wanted to break free.
Yep.
And and which he says here. So I'm going to read. But
Oh,
upon
yeah.
moving up to Poughkeepsie, I felt very much alive and free, and there was no question of his place in my home. Before actually moving in, I first decided where he would go in the living room. First thing he thought about, where's Jesus going here? The room where I was actually to spend all of my time except for eating or sleeping, and then arranged everything else around him. Since the painting was only about 2 feet shorter than the ceiling, remember it was a 6 foot by 4 foot, this huge painting. Since the painting was only about 2 feet shorter than the ceiling, for a while I just kept him on the floor, leaning against the wall. And then after a period of weeks, I felt the time had come to make him more official. And so up he went. The resulting empty space on the floor seemed very bare, and for aesthetic reasons, I felt something should go beneath the painting. I thought of plants, colored pebbles, and the like, but nothing seemed to fit, and so I waited. Several days later, I remember it was a rainy Sunday. It came to me that what it needed was a little table. I quickly constructed one out of boards and bricks. I remember those board and brick days. Believe me, cinder blocks and boards were
Yep.
my
Oh,
first.
yeah. Yep. Me too.
And old telephone cable spools for tables, and
Oh, yeah.
we were good at making furniture out of nothing. So you,
Actually, in addition to the old telephone cable spools, uh, where I lived in Livermore, California, there was just down the street a phone company. Uh, I'm not sure what we call a supply station or whatever, but they would routinely throw little, where they finished wiring a stretch of telephone lines, on the poles. They'd they'd have these little chunks that they were done with, and they're just trash basically. They threw them over the fence, and I grabbed a handful of those, and I remember spending hours and hours soldering them together and going through probably way too much electrical tape to make a cable of two twisted pairs so that I could wire some switches on the back of my folks' Packard Bell stereo to have a set of speakers in the converted tool shed way in the back of their property as a kid that became my ham radio shack and then my electronic music synthesizer lab.
wow.
and, and I'd put on Walter Carlos and Dick Hyman's
Oh God,
synthesizer stuff and things like that. That I was having fun listening to at the time, and switched on Bach, that kind of stuff, and then I'd run like crazy so I wouldn't miss too much of the music. Way to the back of the yard and run into my tool shed, aka Ham Shack, aka synthesizer building lab, and, and then I get to listen to some music because I didn't really have the money to buy a stereo, but sure enough, the phone company was nice enough to throw these little like 2 foot chunks of wire, with
wow.
dozens of twisted pairs in each little chunk over the fence, and you know, just a few of those soldered together made enough to power a couple, to connect a couple of speakers in the far end of the property. Anyway, just something
That
fun.
is like real recycling. That is
I was
beautiful.
recycling. Yes,
I
yes.
love that. Thank you. And I'm thinking the phone company just threw it over the fence. Wow, that's valuable stuff. But wow, and
They
so
wouldn't
of
do that
course
now because the copper is probably worth, a fair
that's what I
amount
was
now.
going to say. That
Yeah,
people would be getting that for the copper. Of course,
yeah.
now they're not making pennies anymore. I don't know.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
that's a whole different thing.
yeah.
But yeah, and of course Walter, who is now Wendy Carlo,
Uh-huh. Hmm.
who was always Wendy Carlos, and never Walter. And how sad that is to live your life.
Well, I
Uh,
was never Bruce and you were never Lynn, but that's
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 right.
that's
And how
taking it to
sad.
another level, right?
Exactly, it is. So yeah, wow. And so yeah, I love it. I love your stories, Bruce. I can just see I can see us. We're so the same. We're so the same. I'm just so grateful for you.
Likewise.
And let's see, people are writing some stuff in the chat. Okay, so uh uh and yeah, so uh
Sounds like Robert has done some similar things with Telco leftovers, he says.
yeah.
That's fun.
Yep, it's amazing. All
Yep.
right. So, okay. So what I needed was a little table. I quickly constructed one out of boards and bricks with a series of ascending steps leading to a platform which was to go in the middle. The next day, I brought some rather nice material for a cover, red for the table and white for the steps. And after it was all finished, I suddenly realized what I had built. It was not a table at all, but an altar. I was quite surprised, if not shocked, that it all developed so naturally and felt so appropriately right that there was no question that it would remain. And
I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if he said, and I thought of putting a blue dot on the wall above it, but
a blue
but,
dot came
but
into my,
that would have come later, right? Yeah.
yeah, that would have, yeah, a
A
little bit.
Heathkit freak. Oh my gosh, yes, I built a Heathkit GR64 shortwave receiver. Robert just put in the chat. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sounds like we've got a lot of shop talk to do. Let's take that all offline.
I
So
love it. I
yeah,
love it. I love it.
yeah.
All right. So he says, the meaning of an altar is a place for prayer, and my praying took the form of sitting or laying in front of it, with Beethoven's last quartets playing and the lights out. And I can see Bruce with Wendy Carlos music in there. My favorite, though, of all of hers is the Sonic Seasonings.
That's a wonderful one. I don't think many people know about it, but it's really a delightful composition. And yeah, I remember. So it is online. You can find it on YouTube,
Yeah,
actually.
I did. I
And I
bought it.
listened to it after so many years, and it was like, wow, it really held up. It was like, this is, kind of a timeless piece, even though it was about the seasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always play them when it's fall. I play
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
winter. You can hear the cow
Oh, yeah, yeah.
bells, and I mean, it's just
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah,
I love it.
it's some nice touches there. Yeah. And it's yeah, fun
Yeah.
composition. And it's certainly a departure from so much of the other works, like particularly like from the Clockwork Orange themes and all that
Right.
stuff he did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I love it so much. And it's so interesting to me, not mentioning Wendy, of course, because I really get connected with the transgender community. But also our favorite movie, The Matrix,
Mm,
was made by two transgender women
mm,
who
mhm.
basically
That's right.
used
That's right. I
what
forgot
they
about that.
made from the movies to do the work on their bodies that they always had wished they could have.
Hmm.
It's this belief in this body. And of course you think, I must have been a man in my past life, or I must have been a woman in my past life, and I'm remembering that. But I think it's just that we are fluid and there's no real gender. And
Mm-hmm,
so,
mm-hmm.
and especially these creative types who are seeing beyond, um, can recognize that. And of course, knowing my own experience, who would not rather be a woman? But that's that's just me. All right. So,
Well,
uh,
if just it's on that with digression, which really doesn't need to be, um, which isn't necessarily digression. I was thinking, well, the whole idea of gender and our biological idea of sexual reproduction really is an intrinsically dualistic thing. I mean, I think, and Ken has an audio about sex and money, as two of our greatest sources of cultural guilt. And then I think he tags on food in there, just as like if there was a third one, that'd probably be it. But they're wonderful classrooms because they remind us that everything that we do with the body, and including making more of them, involves division. You take um, cells to make sperm and eggs. What do? You divide them in half, take half of the DNA, which is a twisted form of the original idea.
your twisted pears.
I came across the word the twisted staircase, and I was thinking, well, that's kind of sounds like a DNA molecule. And in years past, I've put blog posts on Geometry Code about because there's interesting things. The ratio of one turn of the DNA helix is 34 to 21 angstroms, and that's a Fibonacci number ratio, and then there's pentagonal chains off of that, which has the golden ratio. And anyway, it's all kinds of amazing stuff but we made it to keep us enthralled and fascinated with the idea of a dualistic dream that really has uh, this the original purpose of that is to keep us mindless and enthralled with the form, and in all of its dimensions. And yet, in our beloved course, it says Holy Spirit can use everything that we made as a classroom to undo the belief in duality. So just as you can trace the branches, from the farthest tip ends of the tiniest little branches of a tree back to the single root, we can take all of our multiplication and division of form that we call the human race or any other species, and we not necessarily trace it back to one pair, but to one idea of division and duality. But it's a pretty crazy dream, isn't it?
It is a pretty crazy dream, and I'm loving reading, Ken's, his experience, because he's searching for the miraculous. He's searching for the whole.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, in the meaning of the altar is a place for prayer, and my praying took the form of sitting or lying in front of it, with Beethoven's last quartets playing and the lights out. In back of me, I placed a monk's lantern, which shone its light on Jesus, and catching in its right-hand corner of light a wooden cross I had built, over which I draped a piece of red material. This cross I would place on the back of the couch immediately adjacent to the painting. I always felt these moments to be holy ones, and could usually feel a definite spiritual presence in the room with me. This procedure continued regularly for about a year and a half. This first period, which began in Poughkeepsie, can be best characterized as a time when in almost every aspect of my living, I increasingly lived as a monk, though with no knowledge of monasticism nor its traditions. I shall try to describe the course of this development. This monastic path evolved gradually and eventually involved almost every aspect of my life. Though I became aware in time of the nature of this development, it progressed on its own, and for the most part, I did not force changes, but waited for them to proceed at their own pace. It was at some point, I think relatively near the beginning, that I began to consciously be aware that it was indeed God, not a symbol, but God who was with me all this time. And so I came to understand and feel that my way of life, by taking me away from my attachments to the external world, was in very fact leading me closer to him. I began to see how almost every moment of my life was filled with him, if only I freed myself to feel his presence. And over the year and a half, I drew increasingly and steadily closer to him. On moving to Poughkeepsie, I began to keep a careful account of my dreams, which came nightly and usually several at a time. I then began at a slightly later date to keep a diary, and each evening would describe the inner events of the day. At first, I spoke about God, but before long, it was to God that I was speaking, and I began to feel him personally involved in my life. Almost each day, wow, I could feel myself drawing more closely to him. Frequently, in these nightly messages to him, I would ask questions expressing my fears, weaknesses, and above all, my loneliness. And isn't this, when we read that God is lonely without us, this is exactly what he's talking about. He's not talking about, God sitting around going, oh, I'm so sad that, Ken is not here with me. It's my loneliness that I feel because I feel disconnected with God.
Right.
So, he's really expressing it here in a uh, very personal way to me. So, and above all, my loneliness. For although I could not feel God in my uh, relationships with people, and thus would always prefer my solitude, there are many times when the loneliness of such a life weighed heavily upon me. And on occasion, in response to these questions, would come an answer. My hand became as something seized, and my words would race wildly across the page. Usually they would be words of encouragement, support, or demand, but I always found them to be helpful. The solitariness of my life increased, and my need for external stimulation diminished. I even lost all sexual desires. Eating became a deeply felt religious ritual, and my whole style of eating changed drastically, though again, gradually over a period of time. I no longer played records incessantly, but only when I could truly listen. Hearing the interior sounds, Beethoven, Mozart, and Wagner continued to dominate my listening, though occasionally Bach and Schubert as well. My whole life became very simple with only God as its source. I arose early in the morning to write, walk, and to be alone with God. But at the same time, I welcomed my 9 to 5 job at the hospital where I worked, for I knew that without that solid, consistent anchor in the external world, I could never sustain the intensity of my other life. I began once again to play my clarinet. For the first time in my life, seriously practiced and studied it. This too provided strong external support. And I just have to say right now, I wonder what his neighbors were thinking.
Well, interestingly, I've been re-listening to a huge number of Ken's audios, and one of them was featured some excerpts from a recording of Brook, I think Bruck, and there's two very obvious melodic themes in this piece, and Ken plays the clarinet in it, and then he just stops and starts this recording at different places, and a handful of times in his talk, and he is accompanied by a pianist and a um, is it violinist? Anyway, it's a Tanana Lake Trio. I forget the name of the couple that would live nearby when they were in upstate New York, and the 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 fellow of this couple was like a member of the local symphony or something like that, and you know, highly regarded. And Ken was, sort of like I think he used the phrase almost like I use sometimes as aspiring to be an amateur kind of thing, but he was very apologetic. But it was certainly not a uh, you know uh, virtuoso performance, but it was certainly passable, and really added a lot to the conversation about basically how we alternate between the ego and the Holy Spirit. And anyway, I could find that recording if I
That's very cool. If you could tell me the name of that recording, I would love.
yeah.
I have many, many, many of Ken's recordings, but I haven't listened to them all. So
Okay, yeah, I think I've listened to quite a lot of what he's done, but as far as all of them, that's probably a stretch. But I might be close. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I can just see our own Ken Wapnick being there, like a Kenny G, and Kenny W playing his.
Yeah, I think he was more into the classics than the
Yeah, that's true.
light jazz kind of genre. But yeah.
But we love it anyway.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so this too provided strong external support. My professional work with seriously disturbed people had powerfully shown me the dangers and great risks involved in the direction my life was taking me, especially since I felt there was no one from whom I could receive any guidance, only Beethoven and God himself. Well, I don't think he could have asked for better advisors, to be honest with you. So, just my point. Throughout this whole period, I never once doubted the course of my journey, nor its ultimate goal. When I would be with psychotic patients, I would always feel at home and very comfortable in their world. And I knew that world was also part of me, well, part of mine, yes. But with the grace of God, I knew too that I would not be drowned in that inner sea as these patients were, but that He would keep me afloat and help me to become strong. And that this period of my life was one of inner preparation and strengthening. Oh, okay. So he's going to talk about Jung. A great source of support during this period came from the psychologist Jung. For the first time, I began to understand fully the tremendous spiritual depth and implications of his work. And during this period, I read practically all of his important writings. See, this is good for me to hear because honestly, everybody's been like, oh, it's been Freud, it's been Freud. That was the basis for all this. But I listened to Jung and I'm like, this is the course. what this guy is talking about is who I am and what I am in the same way the Course in Miracles does. So, I don't know why they're all jizzed up about Freud, because he figured out the inner voice and the uh, unknown, or the subconscious and all that business. But Jung really was the one who brought God into it, brought the truth of what we are into his discussions, which I find really much more interesting than anything that Freud had to say. But
Well, I think just as a in support of what Ken has emphasized about Freud is that we wouldn't have A Course in Miracles without Freud, is what he has mentioned on several occasions. Because what Freud really did, in addition to giving us ideas like resistance um, and all that, I think the quintessential comment that Ken made about Freud is that Freud knew a bad thing when he saw it, meaning the ego's whole thought system of sin, guilt, and fear.
yes,
He just didn't know it was real. So basically, in the course jargon, it would be kind of equivalent to Freud knew that the only way you could get to the source of the problem was to go into the mind, which is where the ego mind is where the problem was, because it made up all this stuff. But um, but Freud just didn't know it was made up, or as the course might say, we are using our decision maker to choose the ego, and Freud didn't realize that there was another choice. And the other thing that Ken points out, that even to at the very end, he said that Freud still believed that everything could be explained, biochemically or electrochemically, in terms of behavior and thinking and everything. So he in a sense was a materialist in that. Uh, so yeah. So I think what you're saying is, and I haven't read that much of Jung or Freud, other than just a little tiny bit in uh, college psychology classes, but it does seem like Jung added the idea of the archetype, which to me is a helpful one, in that if I realize that I can generalize an issue that I'm having with someone and see that it's the same thing, but the form may be different, but the content's the same. I think that's very helpful. And also, like you say, some of the inspiring aspects of that, there's something beyond um, the unconscious mind.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is, yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And Dove's pointing out in the chat that Helen and Bill were Freudian psychologists, and so that naturally kind of resonated with what they were doing too.
right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But
that
but
was
if we don't have so much of what Freud really gave to the world, the course would be really different, because it really wouldn't have the depth and the intensity, I think, of uh, and the impact of having uh, the ability to show us what we're doing with the unconscious guilt, kind of combining a Freudian and a Jungian ideas, if you will.
like
And
they had a baby.
well, but like, that's what I get from hearing Ken talk about Freud, was that, he really exposed in brilliant ways the ego mind and its whole guilty thought system, and how it was this dark place that no one wanted to look at. And the course does that beautifully, if that's not too much of an oxymoron. But I think that's why, the course is, we're drawn to it, but it's also, when we really get into it, we find it really challenging, because we realize I have to really look at what I've done with my mind and take responsibility for it. Not that it's altered truth or reality or the eternal nature of anything, including us, all of us, but it does seem to have made a horrific nightmare of a world of space and time. And we need to, basically realize our complicity in that. And in order to undo it, we have to see what we're doing, not did, but are continuing to do with our mind on a moment to moment basis, until we decide ultimately to get rid of every little the last vestige of wanting to be separate from each other and from our Creator.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And I mean, we use everything to get to that because it's that's all anything is for. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So do you want to read? Let's
Sure,
start this paragraph again.
sure. Okay. A great source of support during this period came from the psychologist Jung. For the first time, I began to understand fully the tremendous spiritual depth and implications of his work. And during this period, I read practically all of his important writings. He was an important teacher, and I'm deeply grateful for his help. So, although I was physically alone, was I was never truly alone. And above my desk, I put Beethoven's words, written at the time he was composing the Ninth Symphony. When I am alone, I am never alone. And indeed, I wasn't. For I could, for when I could not feel God within, there was always at least one of his teachers to be with me. I was most fortunate. In July of this year, I had a dream with this theme, although the dream's frightening nature expressed my inability to be fully accepting of such company, capital C, at this time. And here's his dream account. I'm in a big house and have entered a luxurious bedroom where I'm to spend the night. It is dark. I get into bed and have an awareness that somebody else is in the room with me. In quotes, X, I think is next to me, but I do not refer to her, somebody else. I suddenly sit up very afraid and try to get the words out. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. But I can't get out a sound. I'm quite frightened and wake up. I, I think, well, I can relate to having a dream where you're trying to call for help and you can't get the words out, you know, and probably a really common kind of dream. But
Yeah, you
I
could
think that would kind of relate to the resistance that Freud coined the term.
sleep paralysis. I do it all the time. I'll be like something frightening
Yeah,
happens in my
yeah,
dream, and I'll be like, "Help me, help me, help me!" And my husband's like, "You're just laying there going wrong, 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 wrong," because I can't speak because I'm paralyzed.
yeah.
And that's how the body keeps us from walking around and getting killed when we're sleeping
Like
is to
Jill,
paralyze us.
what you just uttered kind of remind me of Jill Bolte Taylor's description of when she had the stroke and was trying to call her coworker and realized that when she listened to what she was trying to say through the phone, it came out was something like that.
Yeah, she said like a Labrador retriever,
Yeah.
but her friend said, "You're having a stroke,"
Uh-huh.
and got her help.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but that's where we're at. So,
Hmm.
all right. So, but I'll let you read a little bit more and then we'll close out a little early.
Yeah, I need to leave a few minutes early for what I'm doing, Tony. Anyway, okay. Let's see. So Ken continues. The center of this first period was roughly March through the beginning of September 1971. It represented the culmination of the spiritual growth, and these next few pages will be devoted to it. There were two dreams in May which seemed to epitomize this spirituality. Though 17 days apart, they always seemed to belong together. And in my memory, were always temporarily much closer. I wonder if he meant temporally. Well, anyway, uh, I quote them as I had written them down then. And here's number one. I am on a dream number one. I am on a ship in the southern hemisphere. It is night and the stars are out. I am low, perhaps in a skiff right on the water, looking up. I'm alongside a much larger ship. It is the first time I've seen the sky of the southern world, and there are many, many more stars than the northern. A truly heavenly celestial sight. There are two pathways of stars leading upwards, one from the left and the other from the right, like a huge Milky Way. I say that that must be the aurora borealis. I feel as if I'm a timeless figure in a timeless place, beholding the wonder of the universe. And then Ken comments, the dream recalled to mind an experience I had had when I was a child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. I was standing in our driveway with my friends one night. The sky was very clear and the stars shone brightly. I looked up and felt a strong connection to the stars, which left a strange feeling inside me. I then turned to one of my friends and said, quote, "One day I shall understand all about that." Quote. Since I was never overly interested in astronomy, the meaning of my statement seems to have been more related to cosmic questions of existence and God. The dream also looked forward to a waking experience I had almost exactly 2 years later in Israel, which I shall relate in its temporal sequence. Finally, I clearly associated the dream with Abraham's experience under the stars, when God made his covenant with him, promising that his children would be as numerous as the stars. And here's dream two, rather. I'm in the indoor porch of a house to wait for the time to leave. I sit on a couch facing the windows. Seems a lot like my grandfather's porch. I feel the presentiment of something special, the coming with a capital C. I open up one of the porch windows a little. It starts to come, an immediate mounting, physical, all-embracing experience, far greater than the sexual, involving my entire being, a totally overwhelming kind of feeling. I stop it. The time is too soon yet. I get up and close the window, which stops it. I go to my parents' bedroom where they're getting dressed and almost ready to go. I'm still dazed. My mother asks me when it will happen. I say when the time comes, the person would know from within. Interesting. And then Ken says, I then added, and then another part of the account, the moment in the porch was truly unknowable to me, inexpressible and ineffable, an inner swelling and growth, what would seem to be close to the supreme experience of unity of the highest potential of every human. And I received a vision of it, and I said, not yet. Interesting.
Yeah, and who has not been there?
Mm-hmm.
You know, who of us have not been there when we've been presented with, here it is, and we just said, not yet.
Right. Or we almost immediately make it about the form and the specific rather than to really recognize the depth of our mind's potential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is, how many times I've been given the opportunity to gladden myself and yet, turned away from it, not because, um, only because of fear, really, only because of being not ready. But, and obviously I wasn't ready or else I would have. But I look in those times and think, my God, why didn't I do that back when I was 19? Why didn't I get this, when I was 24? Why didn't I get this? When all this time I've been presented with the same stuff over and over.
Yeah.
And I've been given the opportunity to, see the dream for what it is and let go of it. And yet, I'm not going to let go because I'm afraid. I'm afraid. So I love that.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Well,
Uh,
should we pause here and
yeah,
resume next week?
let's pause here
I need a few
and
minutes
we'll
to
pick
get ready
up
for the
next
next
week.
session. Yeah. Well, thank you, Lynn. Interesting stuff. We're getting into some real interesting parts of Ken's life and how it relates to each of our individual process and progress through the course's undoing of what never was.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I just want to say to you, Bruce, Merry Christmas.
Likewise to you
We
and
won't
all.
be seeing each other until afterwards, so
Mhm.
we can talk about our
Yeah. The,
various Christmas
yep.
and Bob's has to go, so
Yeah. Have a
now we're
peaceful
all
holiday and everyone and I look forward to picking up where we left off next week.
absolutely. Thank you so much, my friend.
Likewise. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, everyone.